Hello, I'm Professor Toybox. I've got Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey with me, and it's Friday, and that means it's time for my next episode of Toybox Tutorials. We've spent the past 6 weeks looking at the Path Creator tool, and I'm sure some of you are eager for me to move on to something else, but I've got one more lesson for you, and that involves branching paths. To demonstrate this capability, I've built a star command base here, and I've dropped a button in the back and connect that up to an object generator so that when I push the button, that will give me a star command blaster that I can use to defend the base. So now we've got that, and I want the enemies to approach from a cave on the other side of that bridge. And so if I come into Spark mode, and I come to the back of the cave, you can see I've dropped a locator here, and behind the wall I've dropped an enemy wave generator. And I've already taken the liberty of configuring the wave to save a little time, and it's going to generate 3 mini Zerg bots and 2 of the medium size. And if we come under properties, I'm going to set the generation delay to 2 seconds apart and come back out of that. Oops. And we want to connect to that locator in the cave, so we'll do that. And I've also added a button out here that we can use to start the alien invasion. And so on a new logic connection, when pressed on the button, we can come over to the enemy wave generator and generate the wave. And so if I were to come out of Spark mode and come over here and push the button, what will happen is the enemy wave generator will spawn the enemies at that locator. The problem is they're just going to wander around until I get close enough, and then they'll move directly toward me and attack. But I want to stay near the base and have the enemies come to me. And ideally, I'd like them to split up and take one of these 3 bridges, one of these 3 branches, and that way it won't be so easy for me to shoot them because they'll be coming at me from 3 different directions. Fortunately, there is a way to do that, and that is to use a branching path. And so if I come out of Spark mode back into the Toybox editor, I'm already in the Creativitoys drawer, and I've got the Path Creator ready to go. And I'm going to drop that right here. And we'll put the end point of this path down just off the end of the bridge here, like that. And then we can come over to the enemy wave generator and do a new path connection and connect it up to that path. And that way the enemies will spawn at that locator and then connect to the path and head on down the path. But when they reach this point, I would like them to be able to go one of 3 different directions. And so to branch off here, I'm going to need another point. And I intentionally did not drop a point here because I haven't shown you how to edit paths yet and put a point in there. And so to add a point here on the path, I have to come back to the previous point along the path, which in this case would be the starting point. And the menu in the lower right corner, there's a plus at the top. So if I press X on my Wii U, that generates another point ahead of it along the path. And I'm going to drop that point about right here. And if we come and select this point, now the menu in the lower right has that plus, and if I select that, it's going to create another point here along ahead of it along this path. But if you look at the menu along the bottom, I can press L on my Wii U to create a branch. And so if I do that, it's now added another point with a green line indicating that this is a branch off of that point. And so I'm going to create another path off of there coming around this corner. And I'll put the endpoint across from that one. Like that. And so you can see we've created a branch off of this point now that goes in that direction. And we can do another one. I'll press L again. And we can create another branch off of that same point. And we'll bring this one around this side to here. And so now we have a path with 2 branches off of this point. And if we select this point, what would happen is now an object moving along the path, in our case an enemy, is going to reach this point, and now it has a choice of which way it's going to go. And if we come into the properties for this point, besides the normal 2 properties here, we have 5 new ones. We have a wait for the main path, and then an active flag and a wait for each of the branches. And this wait is not exactly a percentage. It's the possibility that the object will take that branch. And so if, for example, I change this to 50, then the object on the path will have a 1 in 5 chance of coming down the main path, and a 2 in 5 chance of going down branch 1, and a 2 in 5 chance of taking branch 2. And I'm going to go ahead and leave this set at 100 so we have an even chance that an object will take any of these 3 branches. And I've already connected the enemy wave generator to the path, but we want to come over here to the properties for this. Come down to Toy Box Path, and I'm going to change the movement style from loop to one way and stop. So when an object on the path, when an enemy reaches one of the endpoints of one of those 3 branches, it'll stop. And in order to get it to attack me, I need to turn both of these flags off. And that way, when it reaches the end of the path and stops, the normal attack behavior should kick in. And so now we can go ahead and test that. I got my blaster, everything's hooked up. Let's push the button and see what happens. So now the enemies are spawning at the back of the cave, and they're coming down the path. And when they reach that path point where the branches are, they should start peeling off, and we see them doing that. And that's good. So now the enemies are going to come at me from multiple directions. And now they reach the end of the paths, and the normal attack behavior should kick in, just like that. And now they're coming at me from different directions. So that makes things a little more challenging. And I want to make sure I get all my sparks. So that's how you create a branching path, and that's one example of what you can do with it. Let's look at one more example before we wrap this up for the day. And to do that, I'm going to load up my city toy box one more time, and I'll meet you there in just a moment. Here we are back in my Incredibles themed toy box from my Player Battles mini-series. You may remember in my second lesson on the Path Creator, in episode 34, I created a path around this city block and attached this red car to it. And this particular path is a loop around this city block. And the car just travels in a loop around the block. So to make things a little bit more interesting, let's come over to the opposite corner here, and let's give the car a choice of which way to go. And so I'm going to come over to this point, and I'm going to create a branch, and we're going to give the car the option of turning that corner or going straight. And I'm going to come down here, and I think, we'll put it right here, and then I'm going to come around the corner over to this point, I believe. Yep. We'll put the point there. And then we'll come down here to this intersection. And we'll put this point across from the building about like that. And then come around the corner. And I want to put this one down here. Because we have such a long path, I need to make sure we have enough room to get around this corner. And then the question becomes, since that was a loop and we're branching off of the loop, how do we reconnect the branch to the original path? And there is a way to do that, but it only works with the starting point of the path. And so I can't reconnect to this point. I have to reconnect to the starting point of the path, which is down here. And I can't drop this directly on top of that, so I got to come a little bit behind that starting point. And so this point goes there. And I'll press B to exit. Oops, didn't mean to get out of Spark mode. And so to reconnect this point to the path, we make a new logic connection for that path point. And when point is reached by the object on the path, I'm going to come over to the starting point for the path. And we can come down here and say connect the triggering actor to the path. And so now when an object reaches this point, it's going to reconnect to the main path. And you can use the same logic connection to connect the end of one path to the beginning of another. And so that can be helpful to know to string objects along. And let's come around here and set some speed modifiers on these points. So since the car would be going straight, let's go ahead and set the speed on this and crank this up a little bit to 250. I had it going at 200 on the straightaways around the block and slowing down to 100 as it comes through the intersections, but 250 coming around this long corner here is fine. We'll leave this one set at 100 so it slows down for that turn. Oops. And then for this one, we'll set this point to 250 as well, because it's got a long way to go to get down to the end of that path. And then we can kind of just highlight the road here a little bit and try to get an idea of what that path looks like. So it's a little bit squirrely there. I'm not so sure there's much I can do about that without cutting this corner a little too tight there, because that path right now is passing very close to that light. So we'll see how that works. And then I'm going to come back over here to the branching point. In order to test the reconnecting logic, I'm going to set the main path weight all the way down as far as I can take it, so that the car will prefer the new branch. Ideally, I'd leave that at 100 and let the car decide 50-50 chance of which way it wants to go, but I kind of want it to take the branch so we can see what that looks like. So we'll go ahead and set it at, we can set it at 0, I suppose. We'll set it at 1. I'm not sure if 0 is a good idea, but 1 is fine. Okay, odds are it'll take that other branch. So now we'll press the button and we'll see what happens. And away goes the car. And we'll come into Spark mode so we can follow it a little bit better. So it reaches this intersection and stops. And then it turns the corner. And now the question is what will it do when it reaches this point? Hopefully it will take the branch and go straight. And it did. It's kind of a weird little crossover into the lane there, but I can tweak these points a little bit, I suppose, and make that a little bit better. So now it's taking this branch, it's coming up to this light and turning the corner, and now it's accelerating down the street, And we'll see what happens when it gets back here to the starting point. So you can see it did a little bit of a jump there when it reached the end of the branch and reconnected to the main path, but it's back on the main path, so that's a good thing. If any of you know another way to reconnect a branch to the main path, I would love to hear it. Leave me a note in the comment section and let me know. But at this point, I think we've covered almost all of the path creator properties and logic connections, so next time we'll return to my Fantasia toy box and move on to the next creative toy. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you found these videos on the Path Creator helpful. If so, please give them a like and leave me a note in the comments section to let me know. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel or sign up on my blog if you haven't already done that so you don't miss the next episode. Take care.